is Ryan Miller, and for the past 15 years, I've helped hundreds of people to raise millions of dollars for their funds and for their startups. If you're serious about raising money, launching your business, or taking your life to the next level, this show will give you the answers so that you too can enjoy your pursuit of making billions. Let's get into it.
Hitting the market just right is a critical component when making billions. So my next guest is the co-founder of Jocko Fuel. Listen as he walks us through on his product development skills that made him nail his market, as well as his personal development skills that gave him the mental grit to get there so that you too can enjoy your pursuit of making billions. Here we go. Hey, welcome to another episode of Making Billions. I'm your host, Ryan Miller, and today I have my dear friend, Brian Littlefield. Brian is the co-founder of one of Inc. 500's fastest growing companies and one of the hottest energy drink companies on the market, known as Jocko Fuel. Not only that, but he's partnered with the famous Navy SEAL commander, Jocko Willink, as well as a Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu champion. So what this means is that Brian is about to teach you about the key factors on how to win your market, implement effective leadership, and develop your grit so that you not only win, but you win big. So Brian, welcome to the show, man.
Ryan, thanks for having me on. I'm a fan of your work. I'm looking forward to talking to you and your guests.
Awesome, man. Yeah, we've been very fortunate being top 2% in the world, but we're not here to talk about me. You're very kind. We're here to talk about you. And, right out of the gates, let's hit them right between the eyes. Let's address the beginners. So people who are starting out in this industry, whether it's business, investment, building a product, any of that stuff, people just starting out, I'm wondering if you can help and just talk to the beginners in the audience. How do they win and how do they not lose from your perspective when starting out in this industry?
Yeah, it's a great question. So I like to call it like building a layer of calluses, which like emotionally and physically. And really that's like grit. Like you're going to build yourself some grit. And I think that it's important that some people have it innately and then some people don't. But I'm a believer that it can be acquired. It's one of those things that you can learn, just like leadership, in my opinion, you can learn to lead. And so, people ask me like, well, how do I do it if I am not someone who has that kind of grit to persevere and overcome the challenges and things like that? I'm like, well, there's a lot of things that develop you into that through your childhood and like team sports and things like that. But physical activities like Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu or CrossFit and even things like exposing yourself to extreme hot and cold, like cold plunging and extreme sauna. People think that those are just physical things. Like those are things that are going to rewire your brain. And the one that I've done all those things, aside from CrossFit, I've never been a big CrossFitter myself, but I'm a huge proponent of the sport. I think it's a great thing for people to do. But I found my grit that I would say that I have, my resilience that was built real physical and emotional calluses through Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. And so for me, that's what I can speak about the most. And the one thing I found, and you can use this in different situations, is it reprograms your brain. So not only is it great for you physically, and as we now know that like extreme physical activity is great for the brain on a physiological level, but it actually, like Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu itself, actually reprograms your brain. And what I mean by that is, let's just take a very tactical situation. So let's say somebody, and for people that don't know what Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu is, like it is a grappling art. And you are trying to submit one another after you've gone through a fair amount of training. You actually have these live rolls. And so you can find yourself in a situation where someone is twice your weight. And they're basically, think about Big Brother, like they're sitting on top of you, you're on your back, they're sitting on you, holding you down, and you can't get out. And when you think about that, like most people, like most adults, they are not putting themselves on purpose in situations like this on a daily or weekly or maybe ever basis. So they're not exposing themselves to this uncomfortable situation. And so you're exposing yourself to this on a regular basis and you're put in this position over and over and over again. Because when you start, just like anything, you suck. Like you're going to suck at it. Like, and that's okay. And you need to embrace the suck and you need to push through it because eventually you'll be the hammer and not the nail. So as you're pushing through that and you're reprogramming your brain, you're becoming comfortable in that bad position. So you start with going from being absolutely terrified, uncomfortable, sweaty, panicking, can't breathe, to, okay, I'm starting to become comfortable. Then you become comfortable. Once you become comfortable, you can think and you can start to escape the position. But until you become uncomfortable in the discomfort, like you can't think to maneuver and escape the position. And for me, what I always say in business is there is no business situation. I mean, we've had situations where we'll have like litigation or we have a production run that goes sideways at our manufacturer. And yet we have orders from retailers, like these, multi-million-dollar things that are happening and you're like, and it's weighing on you. And you're just like, if you can handle the situation of like, for me, for instance, if I have like my business partner, Pete Roberts is a good example, massive 260-pound black belt, very, very good one. If he wants to put you in that position, he's going to put you in that position. And I've been doing this a long time. he will be on top of you and you'll be sweating and you need to stop and you need to think and you need to maneuver. And when you get comfortable in that situation, you can overcome all of these business challenges, in my opinion. And it just reprograms your brain. You're no longer really in fight or flight anymore. You're thinking about it way more strategically. So for me, finding some sort of physical activity where you can be under high pressure circumstances to reprogram your brain is like the best way to build this grit and perseverance.
I love that. So you're using your physical environment and your body to adjust the internal world. As we say on this show, success is an inside job. And so while that's catchy, how do you do that? And on this show, we talk about how. And so what Brian's talking about is he's like cold plunges, physical activity, use these things that kind of put you in these difficult situations and allow yourself, first of all, to train your mind as you train your body, your physical acumen, I guess, or your physical abilities, and use that to get you into a panicky state. I'm reminded of a saying, Mike Tyson, everyone has a plan till they get punched in the face, right? So one of those things, and business can give you that metaphorical punch in the face, as well as physical activities. You can literally get punched in the face. But either way, you want to expose yourself. I think what Brian's telling us here is you want to expose yourself into situations that suck, right? Seek discomfort. We could say daily, but whatever it is, work up to that. But you want to put yourself in uncomfortable situations so that you can train yourself, train your mind, and ultimately develop the grit that is necessary to win. So I love that. I absolutely love that. Spoken from a true jiu-jitsu master. Now, that being said, I'm curious, we're talking about developing grit and how to do that. So we said there's physical means that you could subject yourself to. But what about those people who, like yourself, might say, I do have the grit. How do you go about maintaining it once you have it?
Yeah. I mean, so number one, it's maintaining doing that thing that you are probably doing to build the grit, right? So if it's, like it is cold plunges or sauna, or maybe it's hiking and rucking and CrossFit, all those things we mentioned, those physically and mentally challenging things, you got to continue to do those. You can't just build it, right? It needs maintenance. So you got to maintain that grit. And there's a funny story because we started from zero. Like when I say zero, I mean, I remember $0 days where you would go and, like you'd get the alert through the Shopify app and you'd see the sale. It's like ding. But I remember days of $0. And I remember when we started to get traction and we started to, really started to grow a little bit, and grow is relative because this was my perception and mindset then, right? Because it always has to evolve. If it doesn't evolve, you're not going to evolve. The business isn't going to evolve. So I remember my business partner, who I'd mentioned before, he had just gone to somewhere in the Caribbean, came back a couple weeks prior with like some cigars, and he just brought them back as souvenirs. And we don't smoke cigars. I don't smoke cigars. But nevertheless, he had them. And then I remember I brought in the report to him for the week. And it was the first time we had a $50,000 sales week. That was a big deal for us. Like I said, we'd been grinding from zero. That was a huge deal. And for us at the time. And we thought we were the shit. We were like, oh, this is amazing. You know what I mean? We fired up those cigars and we lit them. And I remember going home that night and like something hit me. And I remember going back in the next day and talking to him. And I was like, dude, I felt like I had to wash that complacency off. Like I needed to get in the shower to wash off complacency. It felt dirty. The comfort and the celebration felt dirty. Literally had this conversation and we both agreed. It was like, okay, that was cute, but it's time to keep going. And so where I'm going with that is you'll have these points and periods where you start to feel comfortable. You gotta brush that off. You gotta, because that comfort will absolutely crush your growth. As a person, as a business. If you seek comfort or you embrace that comfort, you are going to stop growing as a business and as a person. So I remember that. I still have the end of it. We wrote the date on it and we actually brought it up a couple weeks ago for the first time because it's been years and years. And we laughed about it on a video chat. It was kind of funny. We both had it in our desk to remind ourselves, like, don't get comfortable.
Man, brilliant. So it sounds like maintaining grit is just avoiding that comfort that we naturally are programmed to go for, or some people are. So that was your $50,000 week. And you and I have spoken offline, totally a hilarious story about you and your business partner. To give you a sense of what it was like. Maybe you could talk about that time when you guys had your first $1 million month. How did Jocko and respond when you guys were elated? How did that go?
I mean, yeah, and this is just like one of those instances. There were many times when in the early days, it would be Jocko, Pete and I, that was really the trifecta. And so we would get on a call, whether it be a weekly call or a monthly call, to review like the performance and things. And I remember hitting those individual, like 50, 100K, $1 million month and just like kind of checking all those boxes. And I remember like the $1 million month, I think that was the one. I remember the call specifically, and we reported it, and Pete and I were sitting together. Jocko was virtual because we were on the East Coast. He's on the West Coast. We're sitting, looking at each other and smiling. And Jocko's he just responds with weak, just weak. And, what's amazing about that is he wasn't trying to belittle us or anything or beat us down. He was just saying like, that's cute. Keep going. We're not there yet. And honestly, that was the best thing he could have ever done. Right. It's because I just talked about it. It's avoiding that comfort, avoiding that. It's like you're hiking a trail and you're stopping and sitting down. Did you really need to? Are you really that tired? Like, do you really need a break? Like, we really going to stop and celebrate right now? I think we should keep going. I think we need to summit and like get back on your feet and let's keep going. And that's exactly what that comment was weak. And it was honestly needed. It took a long time before we got, like a good work. And then, eventually we got a dang. I think we got a dang. Like, I was like, okay, all right, we're getting there. So
that's
a very
awesome.
motivating business partner to have.
Yeah, no kidding. So I think what it talks about here, folks, is that not only, so when we're talking about how do you win and how do you not lose, what Brian, from his experience on a very successful business with a very powerful team and the bench depth that he has and the culture that brings, is he was saying, look, if I could give you any early advice, it's get some grit and learn how to maintain it. Subject yourselves to situations where you get the proverbial punch in the face and you got to figure it out. You had a plan, you get smacked in the mouth, and all of a sudden you're like, what do we do? And what Brian's saying is, look, to get it and maintain it, it's kind of the similar thing, is embrace the suck. Don't sit there and just rest because you want comfort. Rest when you need to rest, not rest when you need comfort. And so learning just to keep moving. And like he said, we need summits, right? Not these rest stops. We need summits. And so finding those summits and keeping going, keeping your foot on the gas, just like a rocket or a jet, right? Right when you have liftoff, you don't let go of the throttle. That won't go very well. So you keep that throttle down to the floor until you get it. Would you say that's a fair summary?
Very.
Awesome. Yeah. So I'd love to transition just on the market that you're in. I'd love to just learn from your perspective, where's your market at? Where is it going? Maybe walk us through what you're seeing out there.
So we play in a lot of different spaces now, which is a lot of fun. So we're in regards to Jocko Fuel, we're in the energy drink space, we're in the protein drink space, we're in the supplement space, we're not just in, like, you think supplements, that's a broad space. Like, we have health and wellness type products. We have sports performance ergogenic type products for physical activity. So like we have a lot of products that kind of spread across different markets, but it's been fun to like dive in and try and penetrate and eat market share in every one of those individual ones. But at a high level, when I'm looking at the market, which is what I believe you asked, like when I'm looking at that market, anytime I'm looking at a new one, I think the thing that I try to look at is a little bit opposite of what other people have done. And I think that's given us a little bit of an advantage. So a lot of times, if someone's getting into a space, let's say they do or don't have experience in that space, I think they have a tendency to say, okay, what's working? So they go, okay, what's working? And we're going to replicate that. What's working? We're going to replicate that. And so let's use energy drinks, for instance. What we found was that was working. You had the Red Bulls, you had the Monsters, you had these other bunts that were popping up trying to eat market share from these guys. And what they were doing is it was like copycat. And you'd see a little bit of differentiation, but it was like copycat. Like, this is working. Why, we don't need to reinvent the wheel. But when you get to a point where the market is so saturated, you have to look at things a little bit differently. So we look at like, well, what's working? But let's also listen to what people have to say about what they don't like about the product. And so that's what I try and do. So I try and look at like, yeah, people say they want caffeine in an energy drink. Makes sense. Okay. So what do other companies do? They just keep adding more caffeine. Instead, let's say, okay, well, what do they like? Well, they like the energy, but they hate the crash. Okay. So let's address that. Let's actually formulate with other ingredients that are known to give you cognitive benefits, but don't give you a crash, like excessive amounts of caffeine. Okay. Well, they like the way it makes them feel, but they don't want all the sugar. Okay, well, we can address that. And so what you do is you look at the things they want, you try and provide those, and then you also look at the things they don't want. And that's the key that nobody really looked at. Like, nobody said, hey, sodium benzoate, potassium sorbate, and, artificial sweeteners and sugar alcohols. Like, they were not caring that people were complaining about these things. They just kept saying, yeah, but we have more caffeine. We have more caffeine. It was always like, we have more. And it was a bit of a circling of the drain, in my opinion. Nobody was really shaking it up. So, kind of long story short, like, that's how I like to look at the market when I'm going into a space. Is not only do I want to give people what they want, but for me, the obvious thing, which, Jocko and I laugh about it, he's talked about it publicly many times, is how did nobody see this giant void in the marketplace where people wanted energy, but they also wanted something healthy? And that's what we did. We stepped in and did that. And we did it 4 years ago, really before there was a real need. And thankfully we were ahead of the curve and right where we needed to be. So.
Yeah, you're being right at the right time, right? So that's the secret sauce. And you're right. So building sometimes we call it a strategy canvas, or building a canvas to say, okay, what are they known for, our competitors in our market? So this is a key thing in product development, whether it's software, physical products, consumables, you name it, it doesn't matter. So you say, okay, what's working now, but what's not working right now, even better, and to say, how do we give them more of what they want and less of what they don't? And that's exactly what Brian Jocko and his team had put together when they were formulating Jocko Fuel, is to say, look, out there, everybody wants energy drinks. Great. However, what they don't want is the crash. They don't want this massive caffeine. It reminds me of the days, remember back in the day when Gillette and these razor companies were just adding more blades and more blades.
Yes.
And then pretty soon you have just like 18 blade razor and you're like, I feel like you guys, your success metric is wrong. And so it's the same thing. It's just like more caffeine. And you're like, okay, you know what? We're going to let those guys obliterate each other. We're actually going to say, how about more healthy ingredients, more things that counterbalance the stuff they don't want? And so they went in that different direction. And just like he said, him and his partners and Jocko and all of them got together and were like, how did nobody see that? Like, it seems obvious. So don't think you have to invent this like Mars rover to land in this complicated thing to have a breakthrough. Often the market is just tied into that hypnosis, whether it's razor blades or energy drinks, is they're just all competing on one thing. Surprisingly, when you drill down, they're competing on one thing, and that one thing is probably not exactly what the market gets. And you can, to use a term, you can outflank your competition. So that being said, where do you see this market going?
Yeah, I mean, I think, like I said, that I think we were a little bit ahead of the curve. And you said right at the, right thing at the right time. I actually think we were right at the wrong time because we were a little bit early. So the first 2 years, we were really slow in growing the energy drink, whereas now it is taken off. So it's one of those things where we were a little bit ahead, but then again, we're not chasing. So what am I thinking about where it's going? I think that, much like you said, what people want isn't necessarily what you're giving them. So the razor, for instance, is a really good example. In our industry, I like to use the example of 5 Hour Energy, because 5 Hour Energy was like they're the OG, their original shot. And then you started seeing like 6 Hour Energy and 7 Hour Energy. And it reminds me of, I think it's like an SNL skit where about like, the 4-minute workout and the 3-minute workout. And it's just so funny where you're not really providing then the customer sees through that. And so those 6 Hour and 7 Hour energies, they just went by the wayside. So I think what it is in our industry is, and thankfully we're leading the charge on this, is people want the efficacy that they have become accustomed to and that they know will come with evolution, but they don't want to sacrifice their health. So they're going to continue to demand cleaner and cleaner and cleaner products. People are avoiding all kinds of different types of ingredients now. So you have to be cognizant of that when you're formulating and when you're creating products. So for us, it's like continuing to push the envelope on efficacy, but maintaining that high quality standard for what we deem as clean.
Perfect. Yeah. And I've noticed, would you say it's fair that a big part of your product development isn't following the headlines, where you got these fancy trends and everybody is like, I'm into this, I'm into that. But, I've explored your company a little bit, and I can see you guys are true to your original values, which is health, creating a healthy product. So you're going to have trends come and go, or sometimes we'll say fads, they'll come and go. And sometimes there's this new chemical or an old chemical or whatever it is. But how has following those trends affected your product development of what you do or don't?
Yeah, I mean, it's a great question. So there's a lot of trends that come and go in this space. First things first, especially being that this is my world when it comes to formulation and product, just because something is trending doesn't mean it's going to last. And so what I always look at is, what is the substance behind it? So if there's a new ingredient, for instance, that's like super hot and trendy, that doesn't necessarily mean we're going to include it in our next formula of, let's say, a testosterone booster or something. Like we're okay, well, let's go look at the data. Okay, well, we went and looked at the data and it was pretty weak and it was in vitro. So maybe it's not as strong as we think it is. We're going to wait and see how it pans out rather than jump on the train. Well, a lot of companies will jump on that bandwagon, right? And like formulate with it. Next thing you know, they need to come up with a reformulation because now it's like the next thing being hated on social media because it's fake and it doesn't work. And, one of those things in particular, to talk specifics, that we haven't done that people were really shocked about was a branched chain amino acid product, BCAAs. And when you look at our lineup, a lot of people, even still today, are unaware that all the recent science has shown that absent of the other amino acids, BCAAs are mostly useless. So it's mostly like flavored water. Like you're not going to get the efficacy that we thought that we used to think. Back when I had my independent supplement store many, many years ago, I used to sell the stuff. I used to take the stuff. We thought it worked. Well, the science has shown that it hasn't. So we're slow to jump onto those trends. And I think that has been protective for us because now you get these social media trends that really expose things. So like all of a sudden, you get a headline about an artificial sweetener, or you get a headline about something. Well, if it has substance, it can tear a business down. It can absolutely tear a business or a product down. So it can be a top selling product. But if all of a sudden people are becoming more savvy in this space. So if all of a sudden like a viral trend goes and it says one particular herb causes liver toxicity, everybody's going to stop taking it. So we are very aware that we need to be aware of the trends, but we don't just jump and leap at them because that's just not our core business.
Yeah. And that goes back to your original point of saying like, you don't want to be reactionary. When we're talking about developing and maintaining grit, you're saying you don't want to be reactionary. So this is one of those areas where it can pull you into that reaction mode and be like, oh no, maybe we should change everything that we built. And because there's this new trend, and you're saying, no, steady. It's okay. Let's stay true to our principles and our product development. I absolutely love that. So as we like to say, I've adopted the saying is you want to follow trend lines, not headlines. So following those trend lines, following the data, not just the kind of where the wind blows every time. So you could see that developing this grit within Jocko Fuel, within the business, Brian and his team have really developed not only the discipline, but also the product that came from it. Absolutely brilliant. Let's talk about let's really get into the heart of the matter. We've talked about a lot of stuff, developing grit, maintaining the course. Now, I'd love to talk about maybe 3 or so things that you could leave behind as far as some very successful points, some areas where you can really help people to drill down and realize some success with you and your look back, with all of your team, all of your experience, all of your discipline and grit. What's some value that you can provide to give our listeners a competitive edge from your perspective?
Yeah, it's thinking about 3 of them in no particular order. What I would say is one thing that's helped us be successful, myself personally and the business, is living into our purpose. Like what is the purpose? Like why do we exist? And, that's helped in, personal and professional life. In professional life, as a brand, we exist because we want to help people be better in life. We want to help them maintain a healthier life, really extend their health span, which is so overlooked. We think about lifespan, we want to extend that health span. And so that has been our purpose. And when you kind of run everything through that filter, and, it's the same thing if you're doing it for yourself personally, when you run things through that purpose, to me, it's like, that's your why. That's where I get my fulfillment from. Like I have a number of things that I'm involved in now, but in particular with Jocko Fuel, like our purpose, my purpose is the same purpose as the entity, which is we live to get up and work another day to help bring more people into the mix, because the more people that we can proliferate the message to, the more people that we can help live a better and healthier life. And so living with purpose is, one of the top 3, like you said, top three things.
Yeah. Top 3. So number 1 is live with purpose, have that purpose, but also those relationships. And I don't know if you've experienced this, Brian, but on that purpose side, because I absolutely agree. And I think people perhaps may not put as much care and thought into what is my purpose. I believe Mark Twain said that we're essentially born twice, the day we were born and the day we find out why. So one of those things is the why he's alluding to is your purpose. Why were you put here? And too often we're like, please, my friends, do not let your purpose go to default, which is to get a job and hopefully live long enough to retire so that you can at least afford some craft dinner and a part-time job as a Walmart greeter. So no disrespect to my friends in Walmart, but we're just saying maybe that's not your purpose of why you're put here. I don't know. I'll let you figure that out. But the reason why we're talking about this, would you say that represents your true North Star?
Yeah. No, for sure. I remember being a teenager and a young adult. Like I, started off in business school, then left, then I went into technologies, then I went back to school for business. Like I was all over the place. It's kind of interesting. I thought that I was supposed to determine my purpose, but instead I was able to find my purpose. And sometimes when I think at a young age, at least I was so, because I'm sort of a planner, I try and like plan and think ahead often. Like I'm very much that way, somewhat too rigid in that way probably, but being that way at a young age and not really knowing what your purpose is yet is somewhat unsettling. And so when you try to force it, or you try and like define it for yourself. Sometimes it's hard, and sometimes you just need to find that purpose. So you got to get it, you got to get outside of your little bubble and your comfort zone, maybe leaving your home state, and maybe, finding new circles of people of influence and things like that. But ultimately, I believe as long as you mentioned, like the Walmart warehouse worker or whatever, like I'm willing to bet that they're not out exposing themselves and trying to be creative and find their purpose, and just because you find your purpose doesn't mean that you're going to find business or financial success or any of that stuff. But to me, whether you do or don't is irrelevant in the way of living a fulfilling life. But most people, I don't think that their purpose is, working in college, like I worked 3 jobs, and one of which was third shift in a warehouse restocking product for a company. So I fucking hated it. It was the worst, but it was all part of the process of finding my purpose. But, I could have been complacent. Like, I'm sure I know people that are still there, so it's one of those things where when you find your purpose, regardless of the outcome, you're going to live a fulfilling life, in my opinion.
I love that. That's brilliant. So what else would you say you can leave behind through your experience? What are some other principles that you found most helpful when succeeding in business, product development, anything at all?
Yeah. So in business and life of, I would say, relationships, I would say there's one thing that I've found that's been very beneficial to me in the sense of my development. The other one that's really, I give to anyone in any industry. And so that one would be provide value at all times. Like really look at your situation that you're in and find a way to add value. There's many different quotes and there's many different ways people have said, be the solution, not the problem. Don't find fault. Like you find, like you got to, have the solution. Don't go to your superior or your partner or whatever it is with the problem. Go with the solution before you go to them with the problem. These types of things are all part of adding value. And so when you find a circle or when you get an opportunity at a business or in a career, in a group that you think you can align with, if you are adding value, then you will be well received and you will be able to continue to scale. I think most people, especially people listening to this show, probably want to grow in business and life. I don't think they're listening to this show because they want to be complacent. They want to sit on the couch and eat potato chips and work, a 9 to 5 that pays minimum wage. Like, I don't think that's this audience. I'm quite confident of that. I think these are people that want to grow and kick ass in life. And so that is you. What I would say, whatever circle you're in, barge your way in, whatever you need to do to get in front of the people or with the people that you want to be with. That's one thing. We always talk, you hear these influencers say, you need to surround yourself by people who are doing what you want to do. Yeah, for sure. What's the next step? When you do, add value. Find a way to add value. Can you do something for them that they can't do on their own? Can you offer something to them that they're not being offered? Can you make something of their life or what they're doing more efficient and more easy? Can you show that you care more about being in that circle than they care to have you in the circle? Like, add value. So that's like the next one I would say is like any situation you're in, especially ones where you're trying to grow, you should be trying to do everything you can to add value.
Awesome. I love that. And, one of the things we talked about is having emotional control. Now, sometimes grit is a part of that, but emotional development and control, how does that play into your leadership thesis, your company? I'd love to hear your thoughts around just having emotional control, because business, when you got money and you got employees and you got payroll that you're not sure you're going to meet, all these early entrepreneurs, those early days, if you remember, required a lot of grit. Maybe walk me through of how did you maintain your emotional state, you and your team? Maybe you can speak to that a little bit.
I didn't. You know what I mean? Like it's that's the thing. Seriously. And that's why it's on my, I would say it's on my list of things that I would recommend to people is build your emotional IQ, build that emotional control, the ability to stop and think and respond and not react, like those types of things. That's one of the things that I'm an emotional person in the sense that I am driven. I'm very passionate when I find my mission and my purpose, like I'm putting all of my effort into that at all times. So I've always, I've gotten better over the years. Let's put it that way. So, but it's a skill that is learned. Now, some people are stoic. They have that innate ability to totally be just basically emotion level 0 at all times. I think that's great. I think that's great. I think that there's opportunities for them to show more emotion, whether that's to instill influence over their people or motivate people or to get people, on board with their mission. I think that could be a purpose, but it's definitely a skill to be stoic. And, again, I think that's something that is learned and earned. So that's one of the things that I've worked on the most as a leader over the years is the ability to control emotion and stop and really process things and look at the whole picture, like 360 view, and make a decision and not, react. And of course, jujitsu helps with that. Right.
I love it, man. That's perfect. So as we wrap things up, just to summarize everything that Brian and I talked about, develop your purpose, really understand why you were born and put here. The second thing he mentioned is, look, constantly provide value. Sometimes we talk about, I call it be a go-giver, right? Be out there, add value, and trust me, things will work out. As we like to say, if some of you who've heard me say it, being generous has made me rich. So be out there, be a generous giver of value, and you will find doors will open up a lot easier, as they have for me and definitely for you. And then the final thing that he mentioned was just develop grit and emotional control. You do these things and you too will be well on your way in your pursuit of making billions.
Wow, what a show. I hope you enjoyed this episode as much as I did. Now, if you haven't done so already, be sure to leave a comment and review on new ideas and guests you want me to bring on for future episodes. Plus, why don't you head over to YouTube and see extra takes while you get to know our guests even better. And make sure to come back for our next episode where we dive even deeper into the people, the process, and the perspectives of both investors and founders. Until then, my friends, stay hungry, focus on your goals, and keep grinding towards your dream of making billions.